Have you ever wondered about the Levites, the tribe without land, chosen by God for something far greater? From violent beginnings to becoming God's chosen priests, their story is one of transformation, leadership, and devotion that has shaped the spiritual foundation of Israel for thousands of years. From the days of Moses, through the rise and fall of Solomon's temple, to their role in preparing the way for Jesus Christ, the Levites have been at the center of some of the Bible's most powerful stories. But their journey doesn't stop there. Even through exile and destruction, the Levites played a key part in restoring worship, and their legacy continued into the New Testament. HG. In today's video, we'll uncover the complete story of the Tribe of Levi, a story filled with drama, redemption, and spiritual transformation. From their humble beginnings to their critical role in the temple, and how they prepared the way for the Messiah, their story holds profound lessons for us all. If you're ready to dive deep into the remarkable journey of faith, sacrifice, and leadership that defines the Levites, stick with us until the end. You won't want to miss how this ancient tribe story connects to our spiritual lives today. Make sure to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this video with friends and family to help us continue spreading the timeless stories of the Bible. Now, let's uncover the incredible legacy of the Levites, a tribe chosen for God's service, starting right now. The story of the tribe of Levi begins with one of the foundational families of Israel, Jacob and his wife Leah. Levi was their third son, born after his older brothers, Reuben and Simeon. But to fully understand Levi's origins, we must explore the dynamics within Jacob's family and the significant circumstances that surrounded his birth. Jacob, who was later named Israel, had two primary wives, Leah and her sister Rachel, and two concubines. This family structure set the stage for deep emotional complexities. Leah was Jacob's first wife, but Rachel was the wife Jacob loved the most. This left Leah in a constant state of longing for her husband's affection. Each of her children, therefore, carried an added weight, not only of familial duty, but of their mother's desire to win Jacob's heart. When Leah gave birth to Levi, she expressed her hope that this child would finally secure Jacob's love. In Genesis chapter 29, verse 34, Leah says, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons." She named him Levi, a name derived from the Hebrew word lawa, meaning joined or attached. This was symbolic of Leah's deep emotional desire to bond with Jacob, hoping that her third son would strengthen their relationship. Yet, despite her hopes, Jacob's heart still leaned toward Rachel. But Levi's birth wasn't just another milestone in Jacob's family. Little did Leah know that this child would become the forefather of one of the most significant tribes in Israel. From Levi's descendants would come the Levites, a group set apart by God to play a unique and sacred role within the people of Israel. Though Levi's early life and his role as a son of Jacob aren't detailed extensively in the Bible, the legacy that would emerge from his lineage is undeniable. Levi's place among the 12 sons of Jacob is significant not just because of his birth, but because of the spiritual heritage his descendants would inherit. As we follow the story of Levi, we see how this tribe was not meant to inherit land like the others, but something much more profound, the priesthood. Levi's descendants would one day become mediators between God and the people of Israel, chosen to serve in the holy tabernacle and later in the temple. This was far from ordinary, as Israelite culture placed a high value on land inheritance. Yet, the Levites were given a different inheritance, the privilege of being God's representatives on earth. The question arises, why would a tribe known for its violent and questionable past, particularly the incident at Shechem, later be set apart for such a holy purpose? Levi's name and his story carry a message that transcends human conflict. His tribe's journey from violent beginnings to becoming the priests and spiritual leaders of Israel shows how God can transform brokenness into something sacred. Let's continue to explore the journey of Levi's descendants and how this once questionable lineage became a beacon of spiritual leadership for Israel. What would make Levi's descendants so significant in the grand story of Israel? Stay with us as we unfold the story. Before Levi's tribe would rise to their sacred calling, their early history was stained by bloodshed. One of the most shocking events involving Levi and his brother Simeon occurred in the town of Shechem, where their sister Dinah faced a grievous wrong. Dinah had gone out to visit the women of the land when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, saw her, seized her, and violated her. This act of defilement ignited a firestorm of anger in her brothers, particularly in Levi and Simeon. Genesis chapter 34 verses 1-2 recounts the tragic event. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. Shechem, however, sought to marry Dinah afterward, and his father Hamor approached Jacob's family to negotiate a marriage alliance. But beneath the surface, Levi and Simeon were plotting vengeance. Although Shechem expressed his desire to make amends by offering a dowry and seeking Dinah's hand in marriage, Levi and Simeon harbored a deeper sense of betrayal and disgrace. They were not satisfied with a peaceful resolution. Using Shechem's desire to marry Dinah as a ruse, they crafted a plan to exact brutal revenge. Levi and Simeon deceived Shechem and his people by agreeing to the marriage on one condition: that every male in the city would be circumcised. Shechem and his people complied, undergoing the painful ritual in the hopes of forging an alliance. However, Levi and Simeon's true intent was far from reconciliation. In Genesis chapter 34 verses 25-26, their plan is revealed. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. In an act of sheer violence, Levi and Simeon slaughtered the men of Shechem while they were weakened from circumcision. Their anger and desire for vengeance led them to destroy not only Shechem, the one who had wronged their sister, but every male in the city, turning what could have been an isolated retribution into a massacre. The consequences of this vengeful act went beyond Shechem. It cast a shadow over the entire family of Jacob. Though Levi and Simeon believed they were defending their sister's honor, their violent retribution brought condemnation from their father. Jacob, fearing reprisal from the surrounding nations, rebuked them for their recklessness. In Genesis chapter 34 verse 30, Jacob said, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." This moment of bloodshed haunted the future of both Simeon and Levi. Years later, on Jacob's deathbed, as he blessed his sons, he withheld a full blessing from Simeon and Levi due to their violent actions in Shechem. In Genesis chapter 49 verses 5-7, Jacob pronounced a harsh judgment. "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." Jacob's curse carried a prophetic weight, foreshadowing the scattering of their descendants throughout the land of Israel. Yet, despite this dark beginning, Levi's future would take an unexpected and redemptive turn. Levi's early story is indeed marked by bloodshed and anger, but it also set the stage for a profound transformation. Despite the curse pronounced on him, Levi's descendants would become one of the most revered tribes in Israel. How did this happen? How could a tribe known for violence and vengeance be chosen by God to serve as priests and intercessors for his people? True to Jacob's prophecy, Levi's descendants were indeed scattered. However, unlike Simeon's tribe, which dwindled in influence, The Levites would go on to inherit something far more significant than land, a spiritual calling. Despite the violent beginnings of the tribe of Levi, God had an extraordinary plan for Levi's descendants. From this very tribe would arise two of Israel's greatest leaders, Moses and Aaron. Moses, chosen by God to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, and Aaron, his older brother, who would become the first high priest of Israel. This moment in history, the Exodus, marked the beginning of a transformation not just for Israel, but for the tribe of Levi. Levi's lineage, once marked by violence, would now take on the role of spiritual leadership and intercession for God's people. Moses, a Levite by birth, was raised in Pharaoh's palace, but was forced to flee Egypt after killing an Egyptian. While living in Midian, he encountered God in the burning bush, where he received the divine call to lead the Israelites out of bondage. Despite his initial reluctance, Moses, with the help of Aaron, returned to Egypt to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites. Aaron, also from the tribe of Levi, played a pivotal role in this process. Acting as Moses' spokesperson, Aaron performed many of the signs and wonders that convinced Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Through Moses and Aaron, the power of God was made manifest in Egypt, culminating in the 10 plagues and the miraculous parting of the Red Sea, where God delivered Israel from Pharaoh's army. But the story of the tribe of Levi truly begins to change during the pivotal events at Mount Sinai. After leading the Israelites into the wilderness, Moses ascended the mountain to meet with God and receive the 10 commandments, while Aaron remained with the people below. During Moses' absence, the Israelites grew restless and impatient. This led to one of the most notorious acts of rebellion in Israel's early history, the golden calf incident. In Moses' absence, the Israelites, forgetting the God who had just delivered them from Egypt, pressured Aaron into creating a golden calf for them to worship. The people proclaimed, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Exodus chapter 32, verse 4. This act of idolatry enraged God, and he threatened to destroy the entire nation. Moses, however, interceded for the people, pleading for God's mercy. When Moses descended from the mountain and saw the people worshipping the golden calf, his anger burned. He shattered the stone tablets inscribed with the 10 commandments and called for a reckoning. The people had fallen into gross idolatry, a direct violation of the covenant they had just entered into with God. But in this moment of crisis, it was the sons of Levi who stood firm. Exodus chapter 32, verse 26 records this decisive moment. Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." It was the Levites who responded to his call, and all the sons of Levi gathered around him. This action would forever set the tribe of Levi apart from the rest of Israel. The Levites demonstrated their loyalty to God by purging the camp of the sin of idolatry. In a painful but necessary act of judgment, they executed those who refused to repent of their worship of the golden calf. Exodus chapter 32, verse 28 tells us that about 3,000 people fell that day. This was a turning point, not just for the tribe of Levi, but for the entire nation of Israel. The Levites had proven their commitment to God in the face of national rebellion. As a result, they were set apart for special service to the Lord, a priesthood that would not only minister to the people, but also serve as mediators between God and Israel. Following this act of devotion, God established the tribe of Levi as his own tribe, a tribe without inheritance of land like the others, but with a spiritual inheritance. Aaron, Moses' brother, was appointed as the first high priest, and Aaron's sons would form the priestly line, responsible for offering sacrifices and maintaining the sacred rituals in the tabernacle. Numbers chapter 18, verse 20, records God's promise to the Levites, "You will have no inheritance in their land, nor will you have any share among them. I am your share and your inheritance among the Israelites." This was a profound shift for the tribe of Levi. While the other tribes of Israel would receive portions of the promised land, the Levites were given the highest honor to be in the direct service of God. From this moment on, the Levites would be entrusted with the care of the tabernacle, the mobile sanctuary that housed the Ark of the Covenant and served as the dwelling place of God's presence among his people. The Levites became responsible for setting up, maintaining, and transporting the tabernacle as the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness. Their role wasn't just about logistics, it was deeply spiritual. They were to safeguard the sacred space, offer sacrifices, and ensure the purity of the nation's worship. This separation and dedication to God's service marked the Levites as a tribe uniquely devoted to holiness, a far cry from their earlier reputation for violence at Shechem. Their involvement in the golden calf incident, not as participants but as agents of God's judgment and purification, marked the beginning of their transformation into a tribe wholly dedicated to the service of the Lord. In this way, the Levites began to take on their new identity, not as warriors of vengeance, but as warriors of spiritual fidelity. The Levites, once cursed for their anger, were now being redeemed through their devotion to God. Their future role in Israel would continue to grow, culminating in their leadership in the tabernacle and later, the temple. But how did the Levites' role evolve as Israel moved into the Promised Land? How would they continue to serve God without a physical inheritance of land? In the next section, we'll explore how the Levites became the custodians of Israel's spiritual life, taking on roles as teachers, priests, and servants of the living God. After the golden calf incident, a remarkable shift occurred in the identity of the tribe of Levi. They were no longer just one of the 12 tribes of Israel. They were now set apart for a holy and specific purpose. God chose the Levites to serve as the priestly tribe, responsible for the spiritual well-being of the entire nation. They would become the custodians of the sacred tabernacle, the mobile sanctuary where God's presence would dwell among his people. The tabernacle, also called the tent of meeting, was no ordinary structure. It was the heart of Israel's worship, the very place where God would meet with Moses and the high priest. The Levites were charged with maintaining this sacred space, a responsibility that carried immense spiritual significance. Unlike the other tribes, who would inherit land when they entered the Promised Land, the Levites were given no such inheritance. Their role was entirely spiritual. In Numbers, chapter 3, verses 12 to 13, God explains this unique calling. I have taken the Levites from among the Israelites in place of the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. The Levites are mine, for all the firstborn are mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set them apart for myself. This declaration by God set the Levites apart, signifying their role as substitutes for the firstborn sons of Israel, who had been spared during the final plague in Egypt. God claimed the Levites as his own, and in return, they would serve him and the people of Israel. At the head of the Levitical tribe stood Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was consecrated as the high priest. Aaron and his sons were anointed and set apart to serve in the most sacred of roles, offering sacrifices on behalf of the people, atoning for their sins, and leading them in worship. Exodus chapter 28, verse 1 highlights this special selection. Have Aaron your brother brought to you from among the Israelites, along with his sons Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, so they may serve me as priests. The priesthood was now firmly established within the tribe of Levi, with Aaron and his descendants holding the highest office. Only they could enter the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the tabernacle where the Ark of the Covenant rested, and only they could perform the rituals required for Israel's atonement. But the responsibilities of the Levites went beyond the high priesthood. The entire tribe had critical duties that ensured the spiritual and physical upkeep of the tabernacle. They were entrusted with maintaining the sacred objects, offering sacrifices on behalf of the people, and teaching the law. Numbers, chapter 8, verse 19, emphasizes the importance of their service. Of all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as gifts to Aaron and his sons to do the work at the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites and to make atonement for them, so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. Their service was not just about rituals, but about standing between the people and God, offering sacrifices to atone for sins and to keep the nation spiritually pure. Their work in the tabernacle ensured that Israel remained in covenant with God. One of the most critical tasks of the Levites was to transport the sacred objects whenever the Israelites moved through the wilderness. They were entrusted with the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized God's very presence among his people. The Kohathites, a specific division within the tribe of Levi, were tasked with carrying the Ark, as well as the sacred altars, menorah, and other holy instruments used in worship. In Numbers, chapter 4, verse 15, we see the solemn nature of their responsibility. After Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Kohathites to come and do the carrying. But they must not touch the holy things, or they will die. This was a grave task, filled with reverence, as the Levites were handling the very symbols of God's holiness. Though the Levites were not given a specific portion of land like the other tribes, they were provided with 48 cities scattered throughout the territories of Israel. These cities were strategically placed so that the Levites could fulfill their duties as teachers and spiritual leaders across the entire nation. 6 of these cities were designated as cities of refuge, where those who had committed manslaughter could seek asylum. In Numbers, chapter 35, verses 6 to 7, God lays out the plan for these cities. 6 of the towns you give the Levites will be cities of refuge, to which a person who has killed someone may flee. In addition, give them 42 other towns. This scattered presence throughout Israel ensured that the Levites would remain close to the people, available to guide them in the ways of God and to administer justice where needed. Since the Levites had no land inheritance, God provided for them through the offerings and tithes given by the rest of Israel. In Numbers, chapter 18, verse 21, God makes this clear: I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meeting. This was their provision, a form of spiritual inheritance. The Levites were sustained through the offerings made to God: grain, oil, wine, and the best parts of the animals brought for sacrifice. In this way, their physical needs were met while they devoted themselves to the spiritual needs of the nation. Their inheritance wasn't measured in land, but in their relationship with God and their role as his chosen servants. The Levites were not merely caretakers of rituals, they were at the spiritual center of Israel's life. They were the link between God and his people, ensuring that the covenant was upheld, the law was taught, and that the nation remained faithful. Their role as the priestly tribe solidified their identity, not through possession of land, but through a higher calling of service, sacrifice, and holiness. This unique identity set the Levites apart and prepared them for even greater responsibilities in the future, as Israel transitioned from the wilderness to the Promised Land. But what would happen when Israel settled in the Promised Land? How would the Levites continue their sacred role in the newly established kingdom? Join us in the next section as we explore the Levites' role in the construction and service of Solomon's temple, the center of Israel's worship for generations to come. The Levites' role, which had been central in the tabernacle during Israel's wilderness years, evolved significantly during the reign of King David and the establishment of the Temple of Solomon. With the tabernacle being a temporary and mobile structure, the construction of the temple represented a monumental shift in Israel's worship practices. This permanent house of God would become the center of Israel's religious life, and the Levites would remain at the heart of it all. Even before the temple was built, King David understood the importance of the Levites and sought to organize them in preparation for the coming era of temple worship. David, a man after God's own heart, longed to build a house for the Lord, though it was his son Solomon who would ultimately complete this vision. Still, David set the stage by appointing the Levites to various roles that would support the worship of God within the soon-to-be constructed temple. David was especially concerned with the musical aspect of worship. He recognized that praise, music, and joyful song were powerful expressions of Israel's devotion to God. As recorded in 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 16, David told the leaders of the Levites to appoint their brothers as singers to sing joyful songs, accompanied by musical instruments, lyres, harps, and cymbals. David established a vast Levitical choir and orchestra to lead the people in worship. Under his leadership, the Levites became not only priests and servants of the temple, but also musicians, instrumental in creating a culture of joyful praise. When Solomon, David's son, completed the construction of the temple, it marked a new chapter in Israel's history. The Temple of Solomon was a breathtaking structure, built with the finest materials, a symbol of Israel's covenant with God. For the Levites, this was the pinnacle of their service. Their roles expanded significantly, and they became the custodians of daily worship and sacrifice, central figures in the spiritual life of Israel. The Levites' duties in the temple were manifold. They were responsible for the daily sacrifices, maintaining the sacred furnishings, and ensuring the purity of the temple. But more than that, they were the facilitators of Israel's ongoing worship of Yahweh. The Levites oversaw the morning and evening sacrifices, the burning of incense, and the offering of prayers. Each day, sacrifices were made to atone for the sins of the people and to maintain the nation's covenant with God. The Levites played an essential role in ensuring that these rituals were performed exactly as God commanded. They acted as mediators, presenting offerings to God on behalf of the people, symbolizing Israel's dependence on His mercy. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 29, verse 11, the importance of their role is emphasized. "My sons, do not be negligent now, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before Him and serve Him, to minister before Him, and to burn incense." Beyond the daily sacrifices, the Levites were charged with keeping the temple in order. They maintained the sacred objects, the menorah, the altar of incense, the table of showbread, and made sure that everything was prepared for the festivals and holy days that Israel observed throughout the year. One of the most striking aspects of the Levites' service was their role in leading Israel's festivals. The Feast of Tabernacles, the Passover, and the Day of Atonement were times when the whole nation came together in worship. The Levites were at the center of these celebrations, leading the people in praise, song, and sacrifice. During the Feast of Tabernacles, for example, the Levites led the nation in joyous worship, playing instruments and singing songs of praise as the people offered sacrifices of thanksgiving. In these moments, the Levites' ministry wasn't just functional, it was profoundly spiritual, leading the entire nation in the joy of worship. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 7, verse 6, we see how central the Levites were during these sacred times. The priests took their positions, as did the Levites with the Lord's musical instruments, which King David had made for praising the Lord and which were used when he gave thanks, saying, "His love endures forever." Opposite the Levites, the priests blew their trumpets, and all the Israelites were standing. In addition to their service in the temple, the Levites continued their role as teachers of the law. They instructed the people in God's commandments, ensuring that Israel remained faithful to the covenant. Their teaching was not confined to ritual duties. They were also responsible for interpreting the law, providing guidance on how to live a life that was pleasing to God. The Levites' teaching role was crucial, as it helped Israel maintain its spiritual identity and pass down the knowledge of God's word from generation to generation. In 2 Chronicles chapter 35, verse 3, we see their teaching role highlighted. He said to the Levites, who instructed all Israel and who had been consecrated to the Lord, "Put the sacred ark in the temple that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, built. It is not to be carried about on your shoulders. Now serve the Lord your God and His people Israel." Through their instruction, the Levites shaped the moral and spiritual fabric of the nation, ensuring that God's laws were not forgotten. The Temple of Solomon became the heart of Israel's spiritual life, and the Levites were its beating pulse. Day and night, year after year, they fulfilled their duties, offering sacrifices, leading worship, and teaching the law. They ensured that the worship of Yahweh remained central to the life of Israel, reminding the people of their covenant with God. The Temple era marked the high point of the Levites' role in Israel. Their service was a testimony to God's faithfulness and his desire to dwell among his people. But their story didn't end with the temple. What would happen to the Levites when the temple was destroyed? How would they continue to serve God and the people in the face of exile and loss? In the next section, we'll explore how the Levites endured through Israel's darkest days and how they helped rebuild the nation during the return from exile. Despite the heights of spiritual devotion in the temple era, Israel's story took a devastating turn. The people's repeated disobedience to God, their idol worship, and failure to follow the law led to God's judgment. The prophet Jeremiah and others had long warned of the consequences of Israel's sins, but their warnings went unheeded. As a result, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC. The once magnificent Temple of Solomon was utterly destroyed, and the people of Israel, including the Levites, were carried into exile. For the Levites, this was not only the loss of their nation, but the destruction of the very heart of their spiritual identity. The temple where they had served God daily, offering sacrifices, leading worship, and teaching the law. The exile in Babylon diminished. The sacrificial system could no longer be carried out, and the central place of worship was gone. Yet, even in exile, the Levites' Ilon was a time of deep sorrow and reflection for all of Israel, but particularly for the Levites. Without the temple, their priestly roles did not lose their sense of calling. Though their formal duties in the temple had ceased, their identity as spiritual leaders remained intact. The Babylonian exile became a time of reflection and renewal for the Levites, as they sought to preserve Israel's faith and identity amidst foreign captivity. Even without the Ark of the Covenant and the sacred objects of the temple, the Levites maintained their role as teachers and leaders of the exiled community. They continued to teach the law of Moses, keeping alive the flame of Israel's spiritual heritage. After 70 years of exile, the Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and issued a decree allowing the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This was a moment of immense joy and hope for the exiled Israelites. For the Levites, it was a chance to return to their sacred duties, to once again serve in the house of the Lord. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah recount this remarkable period of restoration. Under the leadership of Ezra, a priest and teacher of the law, and Nehemiah, the governor of Jerusalem, the exiles began the arduous task of rebuilding the temple and re-establishing the religious life of Israel. The Levites were essential to this effort. As recorded in Ezra, chapter 7, verse 7, some of the Israelites, including priests, Levites, musicians, gatekeepers, and temple servants, also came up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. The Levites returned with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their role was crucial in restoring Israel's worship and spiritual order. Upon their return, the Levites not only helped physically rebuild the temple, but they also restored the rituals and ceremonies that had been central to Israel's relationship with God. The second temple was smaller and less glorious than Solomon's temple, but it represented a profound renewal of the covenant between God and his people. The Levites resumed their duties, overseeing the sacrifices, offering incense, and leading worship once again. In Nehemiah, chapter 12, verses 44 to 45, we see the Levites returning to their full role. At that time, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, firstfruits, and tithes. From the fields around the towns, they were to bring into the storerooms the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah was pleased with the ministering priests and Levites. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification, as did also the musicians and gatekeepers, according to the commands of David and his son Solomon. Their responsibilities extended beyond the rituals of sacrifice. They were also charged with maintaining the storerooms and overseeing the distribution of tithes and offerings, ensuring that the priests and Levites could continue their work without distraction. The Levites' return from exile marked a powerful new chapter in their history. Their roles as priests, musicians, teachers, and judges were restored, and they became once again the backbone of Israel's spiritual life. Even after the destruction of the first temple and the trauma of exile, the Levites proved that their service to God was not tied to a specific place or building, but was rooted in their enduring relationship with Him. Their faithfulness in exile and their leadership in the restoration of the Second Temple showed that the Levites were truly God's chosen tribe, devoted to upholding His law and leading His people in worship. The story of the Levites doesn't end with the Old Testament. Even as Israel transitioned from the era of kings and prophets to the age of Roman rule, the Levites continued to play a central role in the temple and the spiritual life of Israel. But as the New Testament unfolds, a greater spiritual transformation is on the horizon, one that would forever change the relationship between God and His people. At the heart of this transformation was Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And though Jesus' message often challenged the religious leaders of His day, including the Levites, His coming was prepared by none other than John the Baptist, a descendant of Levi. The Gospel of Luke opens with the story of Zechariah, a Levite and a priest, serving in the Temple of Jerusalem. Zechariah was part of the priestly division of Abijah, one of the 24 divisions of priests that rotated to serve in the temple throughout the year. As he carried out his priestly duties, offering incense before the Lord, Zechariah had a divine encounter. The angel Gabriel appeared to him, announcing that he and his wife Elizabeth, who was also a descendant of Aaron, would have a son, John the Baptist. In Luke chapter 1 verse 5, tells us that John's father, Zechariah, was a Levite serving as a priest. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. John's ministry of repentance paved the way for the Messiah. And Jesus Himself frequently interacted with the Levites, often confronting their role in the religious hierarchy. While the Levites were entrusted with the sacred duties of the temple, Jesus emphasized the need for spiritual renewal. In conclusion, today, the legacy of the tribe of Levi continues to echo throughout history. Although the temple no longer stands, the principles of service, worship, and holiness that the Levites embodied remain central to the faith. The tribe's story reminds us of the powerful transformation from violence to sacred service and the importance of remaining devoted to God's calling. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the complete story of the tribe of Levi. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more biblical insights. Until next time, may God's peace be with you.